Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Turkey has rejected superficial demands for a ceasefire in the South Caucasus after a week of fierce fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In an interview, Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said Russia can play a mediating role in a ceasefire only if it is neutral. Meanwhile, ethnic Armenian forces in Nagorno-Karabakh said 51 more service personnel have been killed in the conflict. In Afghanistan, 15 people have been killed and over 30 others injured in a car bomb attack in the eastern province of Nangarhar. Officials said security forces killed the gunmen who tried to enter the compound of Ghani Khail district's governor after the blast. In Sudan, the government and the rebel groups have inked a peace deal aimed at ending decades of war in which tens of thousands have died. Representatives from all the sides, as well as the guarantors of the deal from the African Union and the United Nations, signed the deal in Juba. In India, 5 police officers have been suspended over poor handling of an investigation into the gang rape and murder of a Dalit woman. Police have been slammed for attempting to destroy evidence by cremating the woman's body against her family's wishes. The incident sparked a widespread outrage across India and triggered days of protests. US President Donald Trump has been taken to a military hospital hours after he tested positive for COVID-19. The White House press secretary said Trump will work in a special suite at the hospital for the next few days as a precautionary measure. Meanwhile, India's COVID-19 death toll has topped 100,000, while the infections tally climbed to 6.47 million. In Pakistan, 8 people died from the virus overnight, taking the death toll to over 6,500. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1 million lives and infected more than 34.4 million people. And in the English Premier League, Chelsea thrashed Crystal Palace by 4-0 at Stamford Bridge. Jorginho scored a brace while a goal each by Ben Chilwell and Kovacs Zuma sealed the game for the London side. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Turkey has rejected superficial demands for a ceasefire in the South Caucasus after a week of fierce fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In an interview, Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said Russia can play a mediating role in a ceasefire only if it is neutral. Moscow has a defense pact with Armenia, and it also enjoys good relations with Azerbaijan. Earlier, Azerbaijan's defense ministry said the entire region of Nagorno-Karabakh is witnessing intense battles. Ethnic Armenian forces in Nagorno-Karabakh said 51 more service personnel have been killed in the conflict. A French attempt to relaunch peace talks over Nagorno-Karabakh has so far showed no sign of a breakthrough. The dispute is centered on the control of the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which is recognized as part of Azerbaijan but controlled by ethnic Armenians. 15 people have been killed in a car bomb attack in the eastern Afghan province of Nangarhar. More than 30 were injured. Officials said the security forces killed the gunmen who tried to enter the compound of Ghani Khail district's governor after the blast. The Nangarhar governor's spokesperson has confirmed the casualties. A member of the provincial council said at least 8 of those killed in the attack are civilians. 8 media organizations have slammed the continuous vilification of journalists in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In a joint statement, the organization said media in the territory has paid a heavy price to stay neutral and objective about politics and facts. The statement said for decades, it has been reporting impartially on the atrocities in the Srinagar city of the occupied valley. It said the organizations regret the propaganda aimed at bringing a bad name to Kashmiri media. The media body said such vilification serves the interest of people behind these shameful acts, but it eventually hurts Kashmir. It added, Kashmir media stands united to defeat the ill designs of such elements. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout since August the 5th last year. In India, 5 senior police officers have been suspended over poor handling of an investigation into the gang rape and murder of a Dalit woman. The incident sparked outrage across India and triggered days of protests. Police have been slammed for attempting to destroy evidence by cremating the woman's body against the wishes of her family. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath said Hathras District Police Chief is among those suspended. Earlier, a senior policeman sparked fury after saying that a forensic report and an autopsy had shown that the woman had not been raped. On average, 87 rapes were registered in India every day last year, but large numbers are still unreported. In Sudan, the government and the rebel groups have inked a peace deal aimed at ending decades of war in which tens of thousands of people have died. Representatives from all sides as well as guarantors of the deal from the African Union and the United Nations signed the deal in Juba. The Vice President of the Sudanese Transitional Government called the agreement a proud moment for the country. The peace deal was agreed in principle in August, and an intense mediation process resulted in the final agreement. Britain and the EU have asked the negotiators to work intensively to overcome differences to secure a post-Brexit trade deal. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen spoke via video link after the latest round of talks between London and Brussels. They said that progress has been made in recent weeks, but gaps remain in the areas of fisheries and the level playing field. The two officials also agreed to speak on a regular basis on this issue. Britain formally left the EU in January, but has remained bound by the bloc's rules during a transition phase that ends on December the 31st. In Pakistan, 8 people have died due to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 6,507. The Health Ministry says over 500 more tested positive overnight. It said there are 8,884 total active cases in the country. The ministry said out of over 313,000 detected cases, more than 298,000 have recovered so far. It said over 137,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while over 99,000 have been reported in Punjab so far. The National Command and Operations Centre says 735 hospitals are providing facilities to 717 patients admitted across the country. US President Donald Trump has been taken to a military hospital hours after he tested positive for COVID-19. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1 million lives, infecting more than 34.4 million people. More in this report.
Even after almost a year, the coronavirus is far from over, not sparing even high profiles. Global shares and the oil market have been struck after the news of US President testing positive. The White House press secretary said President Donald Trump will work in a special suit at the hospital for the next few days as a precautionary measure. News has sent a shudder across the country, drawing sympathies from the citizens.
You know, it's very sad, but we keep them in prayer and that they'll recover. I'm sure they're in good medical care, and he'll be back and hopefully for the next debate. And I love our president. I think we need him back in office for the second term.
Meanwhile, the situation in Europe continues to deteriorate. The French authorities have warned that Paris can be put on maximum alert, while Spain is extending drastic restrictions across its capital, Madrid. Poland as well as the UAE have reported the highest number of infections in one day since the pandemic began. The World Health Organization has urged to strengthen the responsive measures against the pandemic.
We urge every single leader to strengthen their response, put targeted measures in place that we know can suppress the spread, ensure that health systems and workers are protected, and saves lives.
Over in Asia, India's COVID-19 death toll has topped 100,000, while the infections tally climbed to 6.47 million, while South Korea's new infections stayed below 100 for the third straight day. But health authorities remain on alert over a potential rebound in infections.
China has accused the US of fabricating lies and trying to take the world back to the jungle age. This comes after Washington accused Beijing and the UN agencies of murdering millions of baby girls through forced abortions. In a statement, China's UN mission spokesperson says some US politicians are undermining multilateral cooperation with their statements. The spokesperson said the US is becoming the biggest destroyer of the existing international order. Meanwhile, the UN Population Fund said it regretted the accusations by the US. Talking to media, UNFPA Executive Director Natalia Kanem said the coercion of women is against the UN's practice and policy. She said the UN has called on the US to review its programs in China, but Washington has been declining the calls for the past 4 years. U.S. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien says Russia has agreed not to interfere in the November presidential election in the U.S. In a tweet, O'Brien says he has held a constructive dialogue with Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev in Geneva. O'Brien said they also discussed a number of bilateral issues of mutual interest. He said arms control, the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, Syria and Afghanistan were on the agenda. O'Brien said while they have differences, he's optimistic two sides can make progress in key areas that will benefit the American and Russian people. Meanwhile, a Russian spokesperson said both the sides confirmed the absence of intention to meddle in each other's internal affairs, including elections. He said the talks took place in order to normalize bilateral relations and strengthen international security. More stories to follow, but right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back. Early voting has begun in New Zealand's general election. Prime Minister and Labour Party leader Jacinda Ardern has cast her vote as she seeks a second term in the office. The Election Commission said voters can head to the advanced polling till the final election day on October the 17th. About 450 advanced polling stations have been opened across the country. The Commission said advanced voting has become more popular as it accounted for 47% of all votes in 2017 and hopes to reach at least 60% this year. New Zealanders are also voting on two other issues of legalizing recreational cannabis and euthanasia. Ardern's Labour Party, governing in a coalition with the Greens, faces the Conservative National Party in a pandemic-dominated campaign. Mexico has deployed 26,000 troops along its southern border to block a migrant caravan heading to the country to cross into the U.S. But speaking to the media, President López Obrador said Mexico wants to avoid a confrontation with the caravan. Obrador said the timing of the caravan ahead of the U.S. presidential election is strange and raised suspicion. Head of the Mexican Migration Authority, Francisco Garduno, told media migrants must respect the immigration law. He said the authorities won't let anyone from the caravan enter into Mexico. Thousands of Honduran migrants are traveling through Guatemala, heading for the U.S. via Mexico. Hundreds of Mexicans took to the streets to mark the 52nd anniversary of the Tlatelolco Square massacre. In 1968, security forces stormed a student protest, killing at least 30 people, while activists claim 300 were killed. Heavily armed police were present at the protest site to quell any violence. Demonstrators threw rocks at the police as they blamed state negligence for the 1968 massacre and lack of justice. Protesters also spoke against the feared massacre of 43 students in 2014, saying little has changed in Mexico over the decades.
Don't let it be what happened in 1968 massacre and everything that has happened since. I believe that repression still happens, that is repression by the state. Rather than serving the people, it just looks after its own interests.
Italy's far-right leader Matteo Salvini has appeared in the court for illegally detaining more than 100 migrants at sea in 2019. Judge Nunzio Saprito is presiding over the closed-door hearing. Prosecutors in the Sicilian city of Catania accused Salvini of abusing his powers as a then interior minister. Salvini had ordered 131 rescued migrants to remain on a ship for 6 days until other states decided to take them. It will be up to the preliminary hearing judge to decide if the case is strong enough for the trial to proceed. Salvini says his former government supported him in his decision to deny the landing of the migrants in Italy. If found guilty, Salvini can be sentenced with 50 years in jail as well as barred from holding a political office in future. Celebrations are in full swing as Germany marks 30 years since the collapse of the Berlin Wall. In a speech, President Frank-Walter Steinmeier says Germany can be proud of the free and democratic country it has become. He paid tribute to the protesters who led the peaceful revolution that paved the way for the reunification. Commemorations to mark the German Unity Day were held in the city of Potsdam, about 25 kilometers southwest of Berlin. The large-scale festivities have been overshadowed by the coronavirus pandemic. Chancellor Angela Merkel struck a similar tone, saying Germans have to be brave again today. In Chile, hundreds took to the streets of Santiago against President Sebastián Piñera's government. Riot police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse stones-throwing demonstrators. Protesters demand the approval of the drafting of a new Magna Carta in the referendum that will take place on the 25th of October. Tensions in the country grew 2 weeks before the anniversary of a social outbreak which began on the 18th of October last year. The mass demonstrations saw thousands killed, injured and arrested, with billions of dollars worth of damage and losses to the businesses. Paraguay has declared a national emergency for 90 days as wildfires burnt vast swaths of the Chaco forest, which is home to many indigenous tribes. The National Emergency Secretariat said it detected over 5,000 fires in 24 hours in Chaco region. The National Emergency Secretariat chief called the region a breeding ground for forest fires, with no rain expected and air temperatures soaring. Authorities said 2 firefighting aircraft have arrived in the country and will douse the most heavily impacted regions. They said all the fires that have been generated are controlled, but they have not won the battle yet. Paraguay's Directorate of Meteorology said it does not expect rainfall until October the 7th. A storm Alex has hit the border region of France and Italy, killing a man and leaving 19 others missing. Talking to reporters, Nice Mayor Christian Estrosi said the storm ravaged several villages around the city on the French Riviera. He said about 100 houses and roads were swept away or partially destroyed. Estrosi said that it was the worst flooding in the area for more than a century. In Italy, a man was killed by a falling tree in the Valle d'Aosta region, while 3 people traveling in a van were swept away by the floods. 6 German trackers were among those missing in the province of Cuneo. In the U.S. state of California, fire crews have adopted a defensive stand and are battling nearly 24 wildfires burning in the foothills of the Napa Valley. The National Weather Service has forecast a return of high winds and hot weather over the next 2 days, sparking fears of uncontrolled fires. The emergency officials said more than 2,500 firefighters are battling the grass fire that broke out on Sunday. They said the blaze has destroyed 248 homes and other structures, with 52,000 residents asked to evacuate. The officials said only about 5% of the grass fire has been contained so far. The 2025 season in the U.S. has so far killed 30 people in California since August the 15th, while 10 have died in Oregon and Washington. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. A week-long holiday in China is full of celebrations across the country. Authorities say a total of 108 million domestic tourist trips have been recorded so far, with tourism revenue reaching 76.5 billion yuan. What festivities made Chinese to travel? Let's take a look at this report.
Celebration vibes are full on in China's holidays that started with the National Day and include the Mid-Autumn Festival. Light shows, carnivals, food festivals and group weddings, every event has been spectacular. Group weddings for some 300 couples were held simultaneously in 7 places in northwest China's Shaanxi province. Couples holding the national flags mixed National Day celebrations into the ceremonies.
As we were occupied with our work previously, we did not have a wedding after we obtained our wedding certificates. So this wedding today also realized a dream of mine. I think this is a quite memorable day.
In the coastal city of Weihai in East China's Shandong province, a fresh oyster festival was put up, which attracted foodies and tourists to feast on. In another food festival, villagers gathered to have noodle together, as noodle symbolizes longevity in the Chinese culture. Over in Wuhan, Chinese cultural items including paper cuts, clay sculpture, and oiled paper umbrella are being offered to tourists.
Wuhan's epidemic situation is now under control, and the city will open all its scenic spots to tourists for free as a gratitude to the people's support in our fight against the epidemic. As an inheritor of intangible cultural heritage, I hope to make my part of contribution.
Other than delicacies, sightseeing is being popular too. The second longest river in China, the Yellow River, is one of the places that has drawn a huge number of tourists.
A group of Palestinian teenagers has been practicing parkour in the blockaded Gaza Strip among the damaged buildings and rubble. Despite the opposition of their families, they resumed their urban activity, which involves climbing and running over buildings and grounds. Details in this report.
Leaping on a building and flipping through the air, jumping over obstacles, these Palestinian parkour athletes hope to make a name for themselves. The boys are leaping to new heights without formal training.
I have been doing parkour for 2 years. Now I'm 14 years old. We have to prefer these abandoned areas because there is no alternative.
Despite the opposition of their families, they resume their activity, which involves climbing and running over buildings and grounds. They have another obstacle which they must leap over, that is the lack of support and facilities.
We gathered for training in an abandoned area close to everyone. We don't have a stadium or a club. We prefer such demolished places to demonstrate our sports. We couldn't find anyone to support us.
In spite of Israeli blockade of Gaza Strip and West Bank, the determined group of parkour athletes resumes the urban activity. Palestinian authorities say Israeli airstrikes have damaged thousands of houses in the Gaza city. Some 65,000 Palestinians were left homeless in Gaza, where infrastructure was badly damaged due to the attacks.
In the English Premier League, Chelsea thrashed Crystal Palace by 4-0 at Stamford Bridge. The Blues struggled to break down a typically solid Palace defence in an uneventful first half. But the second half was a completely different story after Ben Chilwell opened the scoring in the 50th minute. Minutes later, Kurt Zouma scored from a header, while Jorginho braced in the last 10 minutes put the game past Palace. The win has pushed Chelsea to the top 4. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.